Hi everyone, welcome. We have just started a new Facebook Live broadcast, our first for December, and the first that I've done in a little while by myself anyway. So we will give people a little bit of time to join in as you are coming in and starting to watch. Please drop a comment under the video to say hi, so I know who's on board and who's watching. It's always good to know who we have on board. As always, we'll just give people a few minutes to find the video, see the notification, get to the Facebook page, however you're getting on board, before we start the discussion. We have a lot of interesting topics to talk about. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions before the event using the event function that we created for this Q&A. If you liked us doing it like that, let me know. Welcome, Tony. Thanks for participating as always. Great to have you on board. For those others that are watching, give us a like, give us a comment, say hi, so that I know who's here. Hey, Tony. So yeah, we created an event for the Q&A tonight, as opposed to just doing a post, which allowed people to register to submit questions ahead of time. Did you prefer that way of doing it compared to the other way of just posting a photo about the event? Let us know about that. But we have a lot of interesting topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. So it's been recent research talking about diet, which I know is a really interesting topic for everyone. We're going to be talking about stem cells, which again I know is a hot topic of interest. We're going to be talking about the gut microbiome, fall prevention, pain management, remyelination, headaches, vitamin D, so lots of different topics. And as always, for those who are participating live, please do drop your questions and your comments as we're going through. This is all about being interactive. So the whole point of doing these is that I get to talk to you guys directly. It's like our own online group. So please do at any stage if you have comments about things that I'm saying, questions you want me to explain anything further, all you have to do is type in that comments box below the video. I'll see all of those comments and I can respond to them as we're going along. If you have comments or questions about something different to the topics that we're talking about at the time, feel free to drop those down there as well, and I will make sure that I get to answer as many of those questions as I can during the event. Generally, we try and get through all of them. So I can see that a whole heap of new people are just joining now. If you are just joining now, say hi. Drop a like, let me know who's on board. It's always good for me to know who's actually watching, so that I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself, although people would say that I'm more than happy just hearing the sound of my own voice. But if you are one of the new people that's come in, let me know, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds. We'll get started on the first topic, and we'll get into talking about MS research. Hi, Jody. Welcome. Is this your first MStranslate Facebook Live video? I don't know that I've seen you participating in one before. Hi, Robin. Welcome. Thank you for participating. Hi, Debbie. Thanks, everyone, for saying hi. Great to have you all on board. Let me know, is this your first time participating in one of these events? Have you been in them before? It's great. If it is your first one, welcome. I hope you enjoy it. If you're coming back, thank you for coming back and listening to me again. Talk about all of these things. Thank you to people with MS Victoria for sharing the broadcast. That's fantastic. If you've come here from that group. Welcome, fantastic group that we've had a bit before. So thank you to them for sharing the broadcast. Oh, that's awesome, Jody and Robin. Thank you. First time. So as it's your first one, essentially the flow of these. Well, firstly, I should introduce myself. I'm Brett. I'm one of the co-founders of MStranslate. My background is in multiple sclerosis research, and I'm also the science communicator on MStranslate. So I'm the one that takes all of the research and tries to explain it to the MS community in a way that they can understand. You may have seen videos that I've done before, but in these Facebook Live videos, we're just going to be talking about a number of different topics that people have either asked about in advance or things that I've seen in recent research. And you're more than welcome to ask questions or leave comments as we go through. So all you have to do is just keep typing. I welcome as many questions as possible. So ask away. If you want me to explain anything in more detail, please just ask. If you have questions related to what I'm saying or about something different that you want to know about, let me know and we'll go through all of that. So we've been going for a little while now, and I can see that we've got a few people on board. So let's get started on the first topic. And the first thing that I want to talk about is something that we've published recently, but I just want to bring it again to people's attention, just in case you missed it the first time around. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a feature week with a group from Monash University here in Victoria, who are working on many studies, or they've completed many studies looking at employment for people living with multiple sclerosis. So looking at what strategies are important for people to be able to stay in employment, what things work, and they're running a current study at the moment that they're recruiting for. So we were asking anyone in our community that is either currently employed or looking for employment, who is also living in Australia. They're interested in talking to you. They want you to participate in the study. And the whole point of the study is to try and see what strategies are important to help people maintain employment. And we know that maintaining employment has many benefits for people living with MS. And so it's obviously a really important study, because it's the information that they generate off the back of that study will then be passed to MS organisations, so that with their employment support services, they'll be able to give out better information, and also to organisations and employers to have information about, what sort of things can we be doing to help our employees, in this case, the person who's living with multiple sclerosis, not only stay employed, but be happy in their employment, being productive. So if you are someone who's watching at the moment and you do live in Australia, you have MS, and you are currently in employment or looking for employment, they would really like to hear from you. We can drop the link into the comment section for the page on the MStranslate website that has all of the information about the studies that they're doing, the background to the researchers involved. We did a Facebook Live Q&A with them, which you can also watch, but it is really valuable research. So if you are in a position to participate, it's very easy. It's just going to be some questionnaires across a period of time. They would very much appreciate having your involvement. So if you are in that situation, you can also drop a comment here, and I'll make sure that I follow up with you to give you all of the information that you need to express your interest in participating. So that was the first little thing just to tick off. Let's move on to research. So the first one, published research that's come out recently, the first one that I wanted to talk about was a New York study looking at diet and multiple sclerosis. And I'm just going to pull up my notes here on the computer. So this was looking specifically, and we know that diets become something that's very important for the MS community. We know it's something of interest because it's seen as something that a person can do to take control of the management of their disease. So there's been a lot of work going on in this area recently, and more and more we're seeing studies come out on these different types of diets, and there are lots of different diets that are being proposed as being beneficial. And so one of the things at the moment is trying to work out what diet is best, and if any of these diets do have benefits. So this was a randomized controlled trial of a modified Mediterranean diet, and it was just a small study. So in this one, they only had 36 participants, and really what they were looking at to start with was it feasible to be able to run a trial of this diet. Hi, Leanne, thank you for joining. Welcome to the conversation. We're just talking about a study looking at diet and MS at the moment. So the first thing was, would we actually be able to run a trial on diet? And so, if you're going across the time frame of this, would we actually be able to have people commit to doing the diet that we want to test for a period of time? And they found that the answer to that was yes. So more than 90% of people said that they stuck to the diet, and almost 95% of people stayed in the study the whole way through. So, a very good sign that doing trials on this sort of thing would be feasible. Now, obviously, it's a very small study, and so we can't read too much at the moment in terms of what the benefits were, and that's going to need to be followed up in a larger, longer study. But from this small group, what they did see was that there was some improvements in fatigue, and they did see some interesting stuff in terms of disability, in terms of actually seeing maybe an improvement in terms of the EDSS score, which is a measure of disability. But again, with these things in such a small study, we can't read too much into those yet, but certainly there is some suggestions that potentially having this diet could be beneficial. So really what I think the take-home message of this study is, one is that I think we're going to be seeing more structured trials of these dietary interventions to try and generate really scientifically sound evidence as to the benefits of these different dietary approaches. Now, I guess one of the things that we've talked about a lot, and I'd be really happy for people to comment on this, is, are these sorts of trials necessary? Most of the diets that are being proposed really are healthy diets. They all have slight different variations, but there's nothing radical in terms of what a lot of these things are. We could all, everyone could do with eating a bit more healthily. So considering that most of these are just proposing relatively healthy diets, do we need clinical trials in it? And I think probably part of the reason for it is not necessarily, well, part we do want answers as to, will we see benefits? Will people see benefits from it? Even if there's no harm to it, what we don't want is for there to be an assumption that going on one of these diets will have benefits if it won't, because that obviously creates potential where people have expectations and have hopes as to what they might receive out of this. And if that's not the case, then we need to be careful around that. So that's one reason for it. But I think the other main reason is that it's important that we get a lot of crosstalk between the MS community and healthcare professionals. So I guess the push for this strong evidence is probably coming more from the healthcare professionals as well, because they want to know, if I'm going to be recommending a certain diet or certain dietary modifications to the individual that I'm seeing, I want to be really clear about that. I know that there's going to be benefits, or how I communicate to them about that. So, I think that's There's a couple of different reasons why we may need them, but what are your thoughts on that? As we talk about diet, I'll stop talking for a minute to give you guys a chance to respond as well. But what are your thoughts? Do we need these clinical trials to test diets for people living with multiple sclerosis, or should we just be recommending to everyone that they're taking care of their diet? What are your thoughts on that? Well, this study that I'm talking about at the moment, Leanne, was based in New York. There are other studies, and I'll talk about one a little bit later when I talk about stem cells. It may also be of interest. But I'm not sure if either of these are currently recruiting. But we can talk about that a little bit more as well. Jody from Australia. Jody, if you heard the employment study, if you are interested, drop me a comment to let me know that you might be interested in participating in that, and I can give you the information on that one. So that was diet and MS. Any thoughts? Any comments? Let me know. And welcome, Debbie. I missed your comment before, that you've watched before but only recently joined. So thank you for joining and participating. Feel free to ask questions as we go through. Fantastic, Jody. Well, we'll drop you the link. You just need to follow the link. So you can see the link above to our features on it on our website. But I can also find for you, if you give me 2 seconds, the link that you need to follow to participate in the study. So if you click on this will take you to the Monash so that link there will take you to the Monash portal, and through that you'll be able to put in your details, and then the researchers will be in contact with you to go through the next steps. But it's all a quite an easy study. So thank you. Certainly, if you could register for that would be much appreciative of your support. Michael, considering the Wiles diet? Yeah, so I mean, again, another variation on it, and we've done, time flies, I think it might have been 2 years ago, we did interviews with Professor Terry Wiles when she was in Melbourne. She sat down with me and had a bit of a chat, and we can post the links to those videos for you to have a look at. There was some really interesting information in that you might find interesting to help in terms of your consideration as to what you do. It was a very interesting chat. So we'll make sure that we drop that video link to you so that you can have a look at that. All right, excellent. Fee, welcome, Fee. First time for you. I'm not sure that I've seen your name before in them, but welcome. I think we should have studies about dietary for MSs, as currently there are some very visible popular diets which can contradict one another. Having a clearer idea could only be a good thing. Tony agrees with you. Yes, clinical trials, if it is to be transferable. Jody in Melbourne, welcome. So yeah, and I think that's true. I think that's true in that, obviously at the moment we have a number of different diets that are being proposed, and it's difficult to know, I guess, for the MS community, which of these should I be, should I be following any of them, and if so, which one? My gut feel, and this is just my opinion, is that there's going to be a number of factors that play into that. One is that, I think it's probably going to be similar to what we see with MS treatments, in terms of different people will respond differently to different diets, just like they do with different treatments. And it will be somewhat based on, what diet actually works for you. And I know that when we've talked before to people involved in this field that, it's all well and good to say this is the diet that you can follow, but not everyone can follow those diets that strictly. So it's going to be a combination of what's going to be the most beneficial for you as an individual versus, what can you actually accommodate and what are you happy to do. A lot of them suggest eating less meat, but if you're someone that really likes it, maybe you're not going to be happy enough to do that, and so you find that sort of balance. But completely agree that as a researcher and as a scientist by background, I'm always all for getting more evidence and getting some really robust evidence just to help with these sorts of discussions. Hi Lynn, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Sally, any thoughts on ketogenic diet? I hear it's used to treat epilepsy and is very successful, similar to Wild's diet. Yeah, there's certainly been research into it in multiple sclerosis. It's probably worth at some point something that we don't have on MStranslate at the moment. Is sort of a breakdown of all of the different diets, how they differ from each other and what's been found so far. Is that the sort of article that you think would be useful? Would you be interested in reading that if we had sort of a table that summarized the key differences between these diets and also what research has shown to date? Let me know if that's certainly content that you would find interesting. We can look at putting that together and publishing it in the near future. Off the top of my head, Sally, I know people have looked into it. I can't remember what the exact studies have shown so far in terms of that. I can't remember the specifics of those studies, but really good question. Michael, people have different food sensitivities, dietary advice must be tailored. Yeah, completely agree. And there has been studies that have looked at food allergies in terms of people with multiple sclerosis, and we posted an article on that a while back suggesting that food allergies were more common in the MS community. We'll post the link to that to you as well, that article. That's on the MStranslate website, so you can have a read of that. But yeah, as with anything, the decisions around this, just like the decisions around pharmacological treatments, are based on a whole range of factors in terms of potential side effects, life choices. With those treatments, it might be family planning. This obviously it could be to do with just preferences with food sensitivities, things like that. There's going to be lots of things that come into play, but a really important comment that you make. Kelly, assuming that's talking about the summary of the different diets and what's been shown. All right, I will make a note of that. Summary table of diets, and I'll look at publishing something on that in the near future as well. So feel free to keep commenting on diet, and we can keep coming back to it. But one of the things that I want to follow on, because I think it follows on nicely from one of the topics that we just talked about here, is, part of what we said there was, as people living with MS, you may already know that diet is beneficial for you. That you may already use it, and so you may go, why do we need this research? And I said that maybe it's more for the healthcare professionals. Well, in a similar way, we posted a sort of article the other day, a comment about an article the other day talking about anger, and that anger is very prevalent in people living with MS, or is a common sort of symptom in people living with MS, and often the most common reasons for that anger are frustration, generally either frustration with symptoms, frustrations with the limitations that those symptoms impose on a person living with MS, or frustration with the response from people around you about how they don't understand what you're going through and the limitations that the disease places on you. And what I thought was really interesting and really fantastic was that, there was a lot of engagement with that post, and part of that engagement was people saying, yeah, I completely agree. I have those same feelings caused by the same things, and provided some examples. But there was also a number of comments, which I also thought were fantastic, which were basically like, duh, this is why is this at all surprising? Why do we need this sort of research? Now, I think those comments are really valuable, but what I would say is that why that research is important is because there are lots of things that as an MS community and as people living with MS, you know full well. But, neurologists, researchers, people around you, we don't necessarily know that. And it does provide, you may get that sort of one-on-one interaction with a person where they might tell you about it. Or they may not, because they think it's so common that they just assume that you will know. But that's where this sort of research can be important, because it can inform the rest of us about things that are important, because while it may not be hugely surprising that there are these frustrations and these frustrations cause anger, it brings it to the attention of healthcare professionals, brings it to the attention of MS organisations, etc., etc. And then we can do something about it. And so I guess my follow-up question to that, putting it back on, is that I completely understand the duh moment, and this is how is this helpful? And there was a similar one a while ago that got a similar reaction, where there was a study that said a lot of fatigue experienced by people living with MS is caused by a lack of sleep. And people again were saying, what a great finding. If we're not sleeping, we're tired. But again, it may be really easy to understand for people living with MS, but once we see that sort of research and people see that sort of research, they go, well, actually, if that's the case, we can try and find ways to improve sleep. But my question is, if there are so many of these things that are blatantly obvious to the MS community that aren't obvious to the rest of us, how do we improve communication pathways? Obviously research is one of them, and we have researchers that can look in and do that, but there are other ways that you think can do it. I mean, I kind of hope that MStranslate does part of that, as we sort of sit between both groups. And with things like this, we did one with the employment team recently, where a number of questions and comments from the MS community gave them ideas for new research avenues that they could pursue, and we've had that happen before as well. So I think, I like to think that MStranslate forms part of that bridge. But there are other things that you can suggest that you would also think could be helpful. What are some things that you would like to see implemented that would help you have a voice to tell the people around you, be that friends, family, MS organisations, your neurologist, whoever it is, local councils, understand all of these different things? Well, any suggestions on that would be pretty interesting for me to hear. Because we can try and be that conduit. And if you have ideas, we can see if we can try and implement them. So the answer, I have severe reactions to some meds. Is stem cell an option? All right, well, let's talk about stem cells. It's the next, if you saw my notes, it's actually the next topic down after anger. So this is flowing very nicely. Couldn't plan it better. So Sally, it's hard for people to understand what they can't see. Yeah, very valid point. And I think that's why this is really important. It's how do we make people understand better? And for me, I guess I'm part of this community. I was an MS researcher for many years, and so I often say, I understand MS really well, from a level of have an idea as to what the immune system's doing, have an idea of the genetics that are involved, all of these different things happening inside the body in terms of, the disease process. But I have no sort of concept about what it's like to live with MS. But what has helped for me is MStranslate in the past 7 years now, I think, of doing MStranslate, is that I've been able to have these interactions, and I've gone out and I've talked to groups around the place, and we've had these interactions online, and I'm starting to get a much better appreciation of it. But obviously not everyone is in that position where they get to do that. So it's how do we, I'm very interested in, and I think part of it is sharing stories. And if there's anyone that's watching now that's interested in sharing their stories, about different experiences that they've had, it can be their whole MS journey, it can be just part of it, trying to give that sort of understanding, please let us know, because, we're happy to share those stories, whether they be little videos that we record with you, whether they be written articles that you can submit any ideas that you have. I think that's really valuable. I think that's a really good first step. Kylie, I sometimes think I should wear a t-shirt. Hey, look, there was a thing that we posted recently as well about public transport and how do we help for people who do have invisible illnesses. Because at the moment, the signage, part of the process that they were talking about is that the signage on trams, say here in Melbourne, for those seats that are meant to be set aside for people who are living with disabilities, just has an image of a person in a wheelchair or a person with a walking stick. Now, as an MS community, we know full well that, there are plenty of people living with MS who need that seat, who, if you looked at them, you wouldn't notice that. So they're looking at, how do we change the signage to try and include that sort of thing, So, all interesting things to think about. So if we talk about, Sally, I'd like to see the disability sticker on cars change. I don't know how many times I've been told off for parking in a disabled spot. Even though I have a sticker, the wheelchair sign needs to come off. Not every disability is visible. Yep, another perfect example, just like what I was talking about with the public transport. And you do hear those stories all the time. Similarly, people with mobility issues who are, kicked out of pubs because they think that they're drunk. All this sort of stuff. This is another one of those issues that I sort of sit there and I go, no, surely this isn't, surely people aren't abusing someone for parking in a disabled spot if they've got a sticker. But we just hear these stories all the time, and so we do need to find ways of improving that and ways of getting some change. So if we move on to talk about stem cells, because someone commented on stem cells, keep talking about this other stuff as we go on, and I'll keep jumping back and forth between topics. But as we talk about stem cells, so one of the big things that I want to talk about is mesenchymal stem cells. So a lot of what you will have heard us talk about before is hematopoietic stem cells, or HSCT is the main one that we talk about, because that's the one that's had a lot of work done recently in terms of clinical trials as a potential treatment for people living with MS. But I'm not going to talk about that one. I'm going to talk about mesenchymal stem cells. If you do want to talk about HSCT, I'm happy to do that as well. Drop a comment and we can come back to it. But mesenchymal stem cells are a different sort of stem cell. And so, I wrote an article on this recently that's actually going to appear in the MS Auckland magazine. So if you want to read that article, you can go to the MS Auckland website and find their publications, and it'll be in their most recent magazine. But to get an idea as to what stem cells, what we're talking about when we talk about hematopoietic stem cells and mesenchymal stem cells. Often when we talk about stem cells, we say that they're these cells that haven't decided what they're going to be yet. And so our sort of analogy for that is that they're like kids in high school that haven't decided what they want to be when they grow up yet. You know, they get told, you know, you can be anything you want to if you set your mind to it. And that's true in a way. But realistically, it's probably slightly more controlled than that and slightly more targeted than that. So as an example, you may have a student that doesn't know what they want to be, but they're a really good athlete. So they may not have decided yet if they want to be a football player or a cricketer or a basketballer or a netballer, you know, whatever it is, but they're going to go in that sort of direction. Whereas you may have another student that, you know, may not know if they want to be an engineer or a scientist or a doctor, but they're really good at maths and science and they're going to go in that direction. So that's more what we're talking about. We have these hematopoietic stem cells that don't know exactly what they're going to be, but there's a certain pool of things that they can grow up into. Mesenchymal stem cells have a slightly different pool of things. And what's interesting about mesenchymal stem cells, and the reason why there's interest in potentially seeing whether or not they can be useful for people living with MS, is that one of the things that they can grow up into are the cells that can help repair myelin. And so this is what's really interesting about mesenchymal stem cell transplants as a potential treatment for MS, because when we talk about HSCT, the different sort, that's shown really, trials for that have shown some really strong benefits for certain people living with MS that can really slow the disease down and even stop the disease for long periods of time. But there's nothing about that treatment that suggests it's going to repair any of the existing damage, because that's not what those cells do. Whereas with these mesenchymal stem cells, there's potential that they can actually go in there and they can repair some of that damage. They can repair some of that myelin, and as we've talked about many times before, that's really important, and we think that this is going to be the next phase of MS research. So as I reply, yeah, mesenchymal is a fun word to spell, Sally. So that's mesenchymal stem cells. So a couple of things on mesenchymal stem cells. We've recently done, and this may be of interest to, as I try and scroll back through the comments, this may be of interest to Leanne in New York. We've done an interview before with the Tisch MS Research Group, who are based in New York, and they're doing some trials in MS at the moment with mesenchymal stem cells. And they've done an initial trial that showed some benefits, and they're going on to a bigger trial now. So that certainly could be something that you could look into. If you're based in New York, you could look at their studies. You can look at the previous interview that we did with Violaine Harris. Again, we'll post the link to that in the comments section. But you could look at that. And so they're looking into these things. Excitingly, as I think we've mentioned in a couple of our videos post-ECTRIMS, at ECTRIMS we had the privilege of getting an interview with Dimitrios Karousis, who presented some really fascinating data looking at mesenchymal stem cells and saw some really nice benefits in the trial that they did. It looked, the data that they presented looked really promising. So in the near future, we will be publishing that interview. The interview was actually conducted by our great friend, Dr. Travis Stiles, who is involved in the remyelination field. It goes for about 15 minutes, but I guarantee it is very much worth watching to hear about that research, because it is really exciting research. They talk about the fact that at ECTRIMS there was also another mesenchymal stem cell trial that was presented on and discussed, and that failed. And Travis asked that question, you know, we've just heard about a trial that did not work at all, and you're doing a very similar trial, and yours have shown really promising results. Why? And the answer is really good in terms of their thoughts, in terms of how they did the trial and how they gave the treatment and why they saw such good results. So that will be coming soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. Terry Ann, for PPMS as well. So this is, you're talking about in terms of the mesenchymal stem cells or the HSCT? Or either. In terms of, I mean, just to let me know which you're talking about, but in terms of HSCT, which is the one that we have much more data on, there's been many more trials on that. And most of those trials are focused on people with relapsing remitting. And a lot of the data that we have at the moment suggests that people with relapsing remitting MS early in disease course with quite aggressive disease are the ones who are most going to benefit. Okay, for mesenchymal stem cells. So interestingly, the trial that failed at ECTRIMS was a mixture of people with relapsing remitting, secondary progressive and primary progressive MS. The one, it's a really good question. The TISH one is mostly based on people with relapsing remitting, though I think they are including some people with progressive. The one that was with Dr. Sclerosis, again, I think that was mostly relapsing remitting. We don't have a lot of data is my sort of first answer to that in terms of whether or not it would be beneficial to people with PPMS. But do you want my opinion? I can give you some thoughts which are purely my thoughts, but I can share those a little bit. They're not based on, as I said, at the moment we don't necessarily have the data to give a really good answer, but I can give you some thoughts as to why I think it might be slightly different to what we see for HSCT. Let me know if you want me to do. I mean, it's another question that I had, and I wanted to talk about a little bit. Obviously, you know, as a researcher and a scientist, 90% of what we talk about on MStranslate is all based on, you know, this is what has been published, this is what the data has shown. Certainly in our ECTRIMS videos, Travis and I shared our thoughts a little bit as well. Is that something you want to see more of? I mean, I'm always interested to know a little bit about that as to whether or not, as long as it's, you know, I think it's important that it's really clearly stated that, you know, this is the data, these are my thoughts. But do you want that, or do you just want to know, you know, this is what the data shows? Let me know about that. So Susan, I was talking with US doctors who do this work in South America. I heard a podcast with them and Mel Gibson. His father had this treatment, not for MS. It was fascinating. Stem Cell Institute in Panama City. Certainly feel free to, if you can find the link to that podcast, drop it in the comments. I'm sure people would be interested in hearing about it. It is really a fascinating area of research. Terry, yes, please, your thoughts. Okay, so I think my thoughts. HSCT, we haven't seen a lot of benefits for progressive MS. And I think that the sort of consensus around that is probably that what's happening between relapsing remitting disease and progressive disease is that there's a different process that's causing the damage. So in relapsing remitting, we think it's mostly inflammation that's causing the problem. And HSCT is really effective for being able to stop that. When you've got more neurodegeneration, which was what we think the problem is in progressive, HSCT is not really targeting that. And so, you know, it's not necessarily being effective. In the same way that what we've seen, you know, that's true for a lot of the treatments, which is why more recently we've seen actually if you can have progressive disease, but if you still have inflammation, the treatments can be beneficial. You know, we used to think that once you got to progressive disease, these treatments did nothing. But more recent research and a lot of work done out of the Clinical Outcomes Research Unit, CORE, here in Melbourne has shown that actually that's not true. And if there is inflammation still present and there's a target for these therapies, then you can still get benefits out of it. So I think that's why we don't see anything. With mesenchymal stem cells, we're not 100% sure how it's going to work yet, but we're not necessarily, for this, we're more targeting how do we repair and how do we start to promote that repair process. Now, that's not necessarily different between the two. So I see more potential for mesenchymal stem cells to still have benefits. But as I said, that's sort of purely my thoughts at the moment. It will be interesting to see what happens there. Sally, how is that treatment given? Same as HCT. So it is slightly different, and for this I will say hang on for the interview, because that process is discussed in detail in the interview, and I'd rather get Professor Sclerosis to talk about it, being one of the experts, because the problem is, one of the key differences, not to, small spoiler, part of the difference between the failed trial and the successful trial was how the treatment was given. So that's all talked about in the video. So definitely stay tuned to MStranslate for that video. It is very much worth watching. So that's sort of our remyelination stem cell conversation. But happy to take more questions on that if you do have any. It's certainly an interesting topic. But if there aren't any comments on that one, we'll move. I mean, feel free to keep commenting, but otherwise we'll move on to the next topic. And the next topic is going to be the gut microbiome. Are there any trials using mesenchymal in Australia? Yeah, really good question, Debbie. Not that I'm aware of at the moment. Not to say it doesn't exist, but I certainly haven't heard of any. Certainly not trials. There's a HSCT trial that's being started up, but I haven't heard of any mesenchymal trials yet being done here. But I will look into it. But yeah, I'm not aware of any. So if we talk about the gut microbiome, Udrus ponemod versus sphengolimod, are they the same? Yeah, so they're not the same, but what I would say for that, Michael, I will attempt to get to it later. But recently we did a video, well, actually a while ago, I did a video talking about how ponemod works and what was seen in the trials. And so we'll drop the link to that. That's on the website at the moment because we brought it up again when it got approved in Australia for SPMS. They are a similar mechanism. What I will say is that they're sort of targeting the same sort of area, but they're slightly different. But I will post that video in it and have a look at that to start with, and then if there's time. Ange, welcome. Does the mesenchymal stem cells have to be delivered intravenously? So we don't know the answer to that. Again, slight spoiler of the upcoming interview was that they actually saw better results. The one that didn't work was intravenous. The one that did was intrathecal. But again, I don't want to, otherwise the video will get published and you're like, oh, Brett's already told us all about this. I really don't want to take too much away from that video, but very good question, but yeah, it looks like intravenous may not be the best. But that's based off 2 trials that we heard at the time. There's more to be done in that. Susan, would you ever recommend paying to have this treatment? So not in a trial. Are you talking about mesenchymal stem cells or HSC? I mean, to be honest, it doesn't hugely matter. I'm not a clinician. I'm purely a scientific academic researcher. So, recommending treatments is not at all for me to do. So my unfortunate, slightly cop-out answer is just that I can't. Talking about treatments and what treatments people can take or should take isn't something that I'm comfortable doing and not something that I should do. The benefit of that means that you know that the information that is provided on MStranslate is sort of all unbalanced, because all I'm talking about in terms of all of the different treatments is purely the science behind them and what the researchers has showed. It's certainly all I would say regarding treatments and treatment decisions. The biggest things are ensuring that you have as much information as you can before making that decision, and ensuring that that's high quality information. So, MStranslate doesn't have to be your only reference point for that, but certainly can be a reference point in terms of making sure that you get information. Feeling free to ask questions. I'm happy to ask questions about the science behind it and what trials have shown and published information on that sort of stuff. And you can always contact us, privately as well for that sort of information. And then just having really honest conversations, both with your healthcare professionals in terms of what, getting their opinion about what they think is the best treatment option for you. And then making sure that you also include your own life factors in that and include the people around you in that decision-making process as well. Because in the end, I think it's a combination of having access to all of the information, getting an expert clinical opinion, and making a decision that's going to be best for yourself and your family and the people around you in terms of what you want to achieve out of it. So that's my advice. But yeah, recommending certain treatments is not something I can do. Intranasal, and haven't seen anything for mesenchymal stem cells using an intranasal approach. If you have, feel free to drop it. I'd be interested in seeing it, but I haven't. If you've had, hi Luana, welcome. If you've had HSCT, can you have this? Is there a benefit? If you've had HSCT, can you have mesenchymal stem cell transplant? Is that what you're asking? Confirm that that's what you're asking, but so I don't answer something wrong, and I'll follow up if I don't. It's an interesting question. They're certainly targeting different areas. We're not at the stage where anyone's looked into that yet. But it would be interesting. I mean, it would be a lot to do with, I would think that part of the thoughts around whether you could or couldn't do it would be about, all of the side effects and what you can't take. So obviously, after HSCT, there's a period where you're quite immunocompromised before your immune system reboots. So there would be, things around that. I would be very surprised if they would be willing to give you another transplant at that sort of time. Other than that, I mean, my honest answer is I'm not sure. I don't think anyone's, mesenchymal stem cells is so early in the piece. We have only a couple of very early small trials. That sort of, we need to see if it's effective first. And then we'll see. And I mean, a lot of the talk around it is that it may not even be the cells that are important. It may be something that the cells are releasing which is what's causing the positive effect. Now, if that's the case, then, you know, that changes everything, because, you know, treatments become much trickier when we're trying to put cells into people, as opposed to, you know, just giving a treatment where it's a molecule of something. So if they can identify that, then maybe we're talking about something that's, you know, combination sort of therapies. But yeah, easy answer, not sure, great question. The benefits of it, I mean, the suggestion behind your question is perfect in terms of really what we want in the future, and what I've sometimes referred to as what I'm happy to call, you know, people use cure too often. I don't think we're going to cure MS anytime soon, because we still don't really know what causes it. But what I think we might get to is an alternative cure, which is where we can stop the disease really effectively, and that's either with some of the powerful treatments that we have now or something like HSCT. So we're stopping new damage from occurring, and then we're starting to repair the existing damage, so that we're actually starting to, you know, reverse the disease and improve symptoms. Now, you know, HSCT is that stopping the disease, mesenchymal is repairing the damage. So certainly that sort of combination is fantastic in theory. Whether or not it can happen in practice, we don't know yet. But some combination of therapies that do those two things, I think, would be perfect, and what we're sort of aiming for. So to go with mesenchymal, got mesenchymal on the brain. Gut microbiome was the next thing that I was going to talk about. So there was an interesting study, and I'm just trying to pull it up at the moment. An interesting study done, again, this was in New York. This was from the US. This was out of Harvard. And it was looking at gut microbiome and talking about fecal transfers. So apologies if anyone's sitting down for dinner at the moment, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so what they did in this study is that they took mice that had the animal model of MS, which is called EAE, and when the mice were at the worst stage of their disease, essentially, they took their fecal matter. At that time, they took their poop. And what they found was that at that time, there was a certain, what's called a microRNA. Now, it's not really important, but there was something in the poop at that point. And what they did was that they took that out, and just specifically, they made that compound and they gave that to other mice. And what they found was that there was this sort of process where that molecule affected the gut microbiome, and what it did was it specifically increased a certain type of bacteria. And what they found was that when that specific bacteria was increased, that actually led to an increase in the amount of T regulatory cells, or Tregs. And these Tregs are important because they're actually something that keeps the immune system in check. And what we know is that in MS, part of the problem is that those Tregs are decreased. So, you know, that handbrake mechanism almost isn't there. So through nothing else other than this sort of transfer of the molecule found in the feces led to a change in the gut microbiome. That change in the gut microbiome led to a change in the amount of these regulation system in the immune regulatory part of the immune system, and that led to decreased disease. So, you know, I think this is a really interesting. Again, it's a mouse study. It's mouse disease. We need to be careful when we're thinking about, you know, we need to be very clear that this is in an animal model at the moment. So whether or not this, you know, transfers across to human studies, we have no idea yet. But again, it's just interesting information in terms of seeing the potential for altering something in the gut microbiome, directly influencing the immune system in a way that then impacts on disease. So, when we talk about things like diet, as we did at the start of this discussion, is part of the reason that we often see beneficial effects, or people report beneficial effects, is that these different diets are influencing the gut microbiome. Maybe, and we did an interview at Ectrums 2 years ago with Helen Tremlett from the University of British Columbia, where she talked about their role. They look at fecal matter from children with pediatric MS and looking at their gut microbiomes with the end goal. And she said this really nicely of, it's exciting to think that potentially we could use diet as a way of manipulating the gut microbiome as a potential treatment for MS. So again, this is just another piece of that puzzle, providing some pretty interesting information around that. But we'll see where that research goes. Do you have any thoughts on gut microbiome? Is it a topic of interest? Is it something that you want to hear more about? Is that, do you want to see a summary of that research? Should I do one of my little video summaries? Let me know. Just going to give I've been talking non-stop for the last little bit, so just giving a little bit of time if anyone does have any comments on that. Let me know. Yeah, so it's a really interesting area, Sally. I mean, there is a little bit of human stuff going on with it. I know that there's someone in Sydney here in Australia that's looking at it. And I think it will be a really interesting area. I mean, I think a lot of people's initial response is no, but it's again another really interesting avenue as a way of being able to do this. And there's been other research looking into how this can affect disease processes. And, certainly we've talked about this in previous months. I can't remember if we've published an article on fecal transplant research before. But, I'm happy to, there's certainly been other mouse studies involved in it, but yeah, it's certainly an area of interesting research. More info. All right, we'll make sure that I'll do a summary of that research. Just making a note of that so that I can remember to do it. I found removing gluten, dairy, sugar, and grain helped me a lot with my fatigue. Yeah, and fatigue is often one of the commonly reported benefits. Improvements in fatigue, one of the commonly reported benefits of dietary modifications as a way of helping to manage MS. Often, what seems to be the suggestion is that a lot of these diets have anti-inflammatory effects. And that may be a potential for that. More information would definitely be helpful. Okay, Debbie, it's on my to-do list. My to-do list is quite long, but I will make sure I'll make that stuff a priority, and we'll get it up. Dr. Michael Mosley has been writing a lot about the gut and its influence on inflammatory disease. Yeah, it is certainly a really interesting area of research at the moment, and I think we're going to see more and more about it. And this whole notion of the gut-brain axis certainly the effects of what we're seeing here with the gut microbiome don't appear to be restricted just to the gut. And then the influence in terms of what's present there and what sort of bacteria you have, and both in terms of diversity is a thing that's talked about a lot, like how many different species of bacteria do you have living in your gut seems to be important, and also the numbers of them. Having lots of some and not many of others seems to be important as well. So in this case, it was the level of a certain bacteria. In this mouse study, it was the level of a certain bacteria that seems to be important. In other ones, it's talked about, reduced diversity being seen in people with MS. So it's just that there's less species around. But it's certainly a really interesting area of research. Susan, can you get your microbiome tested in just regular life? Is this only a trial thing? Excellent question that I do not know the answer to. I mean, it would certainly be possible to get it tested. It's not necessarily a hugely complicated test, but I don't know. It's certainly not the thing that I think you can just walk into your doctor and say, well, I want my gut microbiome tested that I'm aware of. But you could, it's worth asking. Next time you see someone say, I've heard a lot of interesting research is being done on the gut microbiome. Is it, how would I go about getting mine tested? And they may say, well, we know someone who can do it, or whatever it is. As I said, there's this group up in Sydney, Dr. Barity, I think his name is. But yeah, it's certainly not something that I think is being routinely done, but ask. There is no harm in asking. All I can say is no. We're calling Pete Evans about his findings on diet in the gut. Yeah, there's so many people talking about it now, and I think it's again, I think part of what's interesting about it, and why it's important that we keep talking about it, is because diet is something that people can do, and I think comments that we've had from the community is that part of what's difficult, and there are many things obviously that are difficult about living with MS, but part of it is that lack of control, feeling like you're not in control and not knowing what tomorrow brings, and just having to wait and live with that uncertainty. So having things like diet and exercise and different things like that you can do to help manage, I think it is really important. Welcome, Leanne. Susan, thanks. I see a functional doctor, so I might ask him. Yeah, why not? And then just ask. So Leanne, I'm pretty sure you were asking about mesenchymal stem cells in your question that you submitted a while back. We have discussed it already, so this will be published. Once we're finished, it gets published to the website. It was just a bit before this, so probably look, you don't want to watch the whole video. I'm guessing look around the 40-ish minute mark of the video and see where we start to talk about it. It's probably around about there. You may need to play around a little bit, but it was sort of just a little bit before this. Not in the first half an hour, I don't think. But is it as effective for progressive MS? You're talking about gut microbiome stuff, Michael? Or diets, or what's the... Yeah, it's just, I don't know how routinely they do the gut microbiome testing, Fran. I mean, it would probably really just be submitting a fecal sample and having that analysed. Would probably be the main way of it being done. But yeah, I don't know how easy that is to request. Ask it and let us know, Susan. It's valuable information. I'm sure other people would be interested in knowing, and we'll chase it up as well. Yeah, good question. I mean, what's certainly EAE is more, you know, it's not a great model. Well, sorry, I should say that. I mean, it's when we're talking about EAE and these mouse studies, it's hard to reflect back to, you know, progressive and relapsing remitting. Will diet be beneficial for progressive MS? So I guess it comes back, so these are my thoughts. I don't know the answer. I don't think we have the answer conclusively yet. If we think about that sort of study, I think about the thoughts that we had before. If we think that one of the ways that diet's working is decreasing inflammation, then it's probably similar to what we talked about before. You can have progressive disease and still have a lot of inflammation. So in that case, yes, you would see benefits from it, just like taking the treatments can be effective. If there are other things that are going on and it's gut microbiome, and if it's gut microbiome that's affecting things that are involved in this degeneration, potentially, but yeah, I don't know that we, I don't know that we hugely know the answer, or certainly if we do, I haven't seen it. It's a really good question, and you know, we need to be asking that sort of question every time we talk about this sort of stuff, because it is important that we are getting more and more focus on progressive MS, and that we don't always just think about relapsing remitting. So very good question. Andrea, Dr. Wolfgang Marks did a research update for MS, and it's on their website. He's researching gut microbiome. Fantastic. Well, there you go. Certainly worth looking, and look, we might contact him as well and see if he wants to do some stuff across MStranslate. You know, it'd be great to get some information on his research. We'll ask him and see what he comes back with. Yeah, no, I mean, that's potentially my thoughts as well, but you know, inflammation might be just part of what's going on, Michael. So, you know, I think we need to know more. A very valid point. You know, anecdotal evidence would be interesting if there's anyone here that does. I know a lot of our community you are using different forms of diets as a part of their MS management plans. If you are doing that and you do have progressive MS, have you seen benefits? You know, anecdotal evidence has a part to play in sort of starting to shape these directions, and start to give us some initial sort of ideas. But yeah, I don't think we hugely know the answer. So going back to my list, one of the questions, the next thing that I have to get to, because it was a question that was submitted before. I don't know if Rita is here. Rita, if you are here, say hi, because we're going to start to talk about your question. So Rita submitted a question beforehand about headaches, and asked whether or not headaches are common, and really, especially severe headaches are common in people with MS, living with MS. So if you're watching, if you're one of the people that's watching at the moment and you have thoughts on this as someone, you know, who might be living with MS and has your own personal experience that you want to share, please comment with those thoughts. But in terms of what the research has shown so far, the easy answer is yes. There certainly has been links made between multiple sclerosis and headaches. And in fact, some research has shown, or certainly suggested, that headaches and severe headaches might be one of the earliest symptoms of multiple sclerosis, and could be a useful thing to monitor in terms of being able to detect MS earlier. So there was a study from a couple of years ago where they showed that people not long after being diagnosed, I think it was about 80%, maybe 78%, I think was the exact number, of the people diagnosed with MS had attended, I think they'd attended a doctor or a clinic at some point in the future, just before that, complaining of headaches. So indicating that potentially, this is one of the earliest symptoms. Other research has shown that they do seem to be more common in people living with MS, and different types of headaches reported. So migraines, cluster headaches, tension headaches have all been reported as being more common in people living with MS than the general population. But what's unclear at the moment from the research, as far as I'm aware at the moment, and I'm sure there's lots more research on this that I haven't read, but what seems to be unclear at the moment is exactly how these headaches line up with MS. So, while we think that they're more common, is there an actual MS headache? That's a specific symptom of having multiple sclerosis, or is it just that people with MS are more likely to get these headaches that other people also experience? And I think that's unclear at the moment. Certainly there may be some sort of situations or factors that make them more prevalent. So obviously, things like stress, depression can lead to these headaches as well, and maybe they're more prominent in people with MS, which is why they get people with MS have these headaches. Yeah, but the answer in terms of whether it's an actual specific MS headache or just others is pretty unclear at the moment. So to answer your question, Rita, if you're not here now, hopefully you'll watch it back at some point, and I'll make sure I drop you a message to let you know that the answer is yes. The simple answer to that question is yes. So Michael, headaches are not a problem for me, thankfully. Sally, headaches, no. Extreme pressure in my head when stressed or fatigued. It's my first sign I need to rest or go down quick. Jody, no headaches, but I do get very dizzy spells. Christine, welcome Christine. Yes, severe migraine type headaches. Sally, heat can cause it too. Yeah, and so, I mean, another cause that we know can cause headaches is dehydration, and we know that, so sorry, just relating that to heat, we know that thermoregulation or dealing with temperature changes is also a problem with MS, but part of that and part of the headaches can be caused by dehydration, and we know that people living with MS can often get dehydrated, and there are various reasons for that. One being that research showed that one of those reasons is that people living with MS might be more reluctant to take on water and other beverages to hydrate because of concerns about being able to find a bathroom if there's bladder problems there, but that leads to dehydration, which can lead to headaches. There you go, Fran, we're on the same page. Fran said hydration is really important as we head into summer and should be a first step when dealing with headaches. So yeah, thank you for everyone on the comments on that. As I said, that was a question that was submitted by a member of our community. So I think it's always really valuable that I can sit here and talk about what the researchers showed, but I think people also find it invaluable to be able to hear about other people's experiences, because it's what we've heard from people is that it's a little bit comforting to be able to hear that you're not alone with your experiences. So, your input and your comments is extremely valuable to this as well. So thank you for everyone for your comments on that and throughout the evening. This has been fantastic. And speaking of engagement, see, this is just flowing. All my topics are just flowing together. Speaking of engagement, one of the things that I did want to talk about a little bit, and this was a question that was submitted by Kathy, and I don't know if Kathy is watching at the moment, but Kathy was talking about vitamin D and the vitamin D poll that we did the other day. And so to sort of summarize the vitamin D, it's not the huge bit that I want to talk about. The vitamin D, it's an interesting area of research, but to sum up that poll, it seemed that the majority of people that voted, were monitoring their vitamin D and or taking supplements. That seemed to be, that was the overwhelming responses were for that. But what I want to talk about with those polls, pain is my next topic, Debbie, so hold on for that. That's the next thing that I'm going to talk about. What I want to talk about with those polls is that we see fantastic engagement for them. And I'm really interested to know what it is about those posts that makes people want to comment, makes people want to vote. If you can, because we'd love, we get fantastic engagement on all of our posts, but those ones specifically seem to really engage people, and they really want to share. So if you can tell me anything about what it is about those posts, is it the fact that you're being directly asked a question? Is it the ability to share your opinion? Is it just that the images are often engaging and so draw your attention? Is it that the text is short? I don't know what it is, but they're fantastic. So understanding that a bit better is useful. As one thing to talk about, as the second thing to talk about, and I talked about this with a phone group meeting that I was the guest speaker on a couple of weeks ago, is we did a question on one of the polls a few weeks ago. Was trying to understand what proportion of our community were relapsing or remitting, or were secondary progressive or primary progressive. And as you will have seen with our Facebook polls, we use reactions as an easy way of people to being able to vote. Now, we're somewhat restricted in terms of what reactions we can use, because Facebook gives you like, they give you love, they give you haha, they give you wow, they give you sad, or they give you angry. So those are the 6 options. So now, obviously, when you're asking a question, like where you're trying to get people to vote on relapsing, remitting, or progressive, it's difficult to know which of those options to choose. And someone commented and said, I think we ended up having love for relapsing, remitting. And someone commented underneath and said, why would we love the fact that we've got relapsing, remitting MS, which is a very valid comment. And Eric and I had the conversation earlier in the day when I was putting the post together, where I said to him, I don't know what reaction to use for this, because it's not, we want to know, we want the answer to this question, but how do we do it? Because if we can't, I don't want to use haha, obviously. We don't hugely want to use angry, because that's not the sort of emotion either. We can use sad maybe for one of them. It's not perfect either. Or I think it wasn't love. I think it was wow. Why would we say wow that we had relapsing, remitting? So a very valid comment, but just to make that point that, we completely understood that, but we were just restricted in terms of what reactions we could use, and we thought exactly the same thing. But often, not often, we do these vote posts because we're interested. Like, I use it as a way of getting information to be able to tailor the content that we do. So, when we ask about vitamin D, we will be doing an article where we talk about vitamin D research, or, do we have a lot more people with progressive MS, so we need to be writing more about that? There is a reason behind it, and that's why we do it. Yeah, so it's a good comment, Leanne. What about doing a poll? The problem with polls, I have 2 problems with the Facebook polls. One, good that we just got what just happened. I'm just seeing all of the reactions fly. So generally when people react, I see them all fly across the screen, and I just saw every single different reaction fly across the screen. Someone was just demonstrating all of the different ones that exist. The problem with polls, one, we're restricted to only 2 options. Facebook doesn't allow us to do more than that at the moment. You've only got option 1 and option 2. And the other difficulty with it is then you have, well, often I want an image with it, because we find that images are quite important to get attention and to get engagement. And it's quite difficult to think of an image for each of those separate ones. And we've done it before, and for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to generate, as I said about using the reactions in those polls. We get a lot of responses. When we've done the polls, we see nowhere near as many. It's a good point. I would like to use them more, and we use them on Twitter. But in terms of Facebook, yeah, at the moment, there's reasons why we don't do that. Mostly based on we just don't see as good a response to them. Thanks, Susan. Thanks for sharing that. If anyone's interested in listening to that, there's the link. Kylie, I'm only ever bothered about writing things down because family and friends can see it if it's public. Yeah, look, it's a hugely valid point, really important consideration, and certainly something that we take really seriously. So one of the big things that we decided early on with MStranslate is a couple of things. One, you don't need to like the page to be able to see the content, so you can set up settings so that only your followers can see what you publish. We didn't do that, and you don't even need a Facebook account to be able to view our content. Now, obviously, from that point of view, the negative for us is, we have about 2,100 likes on Facebook at the moment. We don't know what the actual numbers are. So when we talk to people about, why you should promote your research through MStranslate, we don't know the exact number, because we know that a lot of people are probably viewing it without liking the page because we can. The reason for us doing that is exactly that point, Kylie, because we know that a lot of people don't necessarily want to disclose their MS status, or specifics about how they're going with their MS or anything like that. And with Facebook as a platform, obviously it's linked to your personal accounts, and so as you say, your friends, family can see if you like MStranslate. If you haven't told people that you've been diagnosed with MS and then you like MStranslate, people are going to start, and everyone sees that in their newsfeed, they're going to start wondering, why are you following a page about multiple sclerosis research? So yeah, we understand that, and that's why we made those decisions early on. We want our information to be freely accessible to everyone, and for people to be able to get them without having those sorts of concerns. So it's it's a really valid point, and it's always one of the difficult things about using social media to communicate these types of concepts, and also why all of our videos also go up on YouTube, while we also have a Twitter account, while our unique content goes up on the website, so that there's multiple platforms where people can access this information if Facebook isn't the one that you want to use for it. As a way of that. All right, we are we're about an hour and a half in. We've still got a lot of people watching, and someone's commented on pain, so it was on my list of things that I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm not going to keep this going forever, because I understand that people want to enjoy their evenings, and I'm sure you're getting to a point where you're sick of hearing my voice. But pain is an interesting concept. So someone was talking about what research is being done on that. So there was a review published really recently that was looking at pain management and the research that's gone into that. And what they suggested was that most of the recent research into pain management for people living with multiple sclerosis is looking at non-pharmaceutical interventions for it. And the main ones that the research has been focused on is water exercises, so aquatherapy, yoga, cannabis, which is obviously a huge topic of interest, and then two different types of electrical sort of stimulation, one called TENS, which is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, so through the skin, or TDCS, which is transcranial direct current stimulation, so where it's going, where the electrical current's going into the brain. The outcome of this is what they've sort of suggested is that there's still a lot of work to be done in this area, that the research on all of these different things hasn't been particularly conclusive. But it is an area of interest, and symptomatic treatment is certainly becoming a big area of interest in MS research in general. So for a long time, the research was very much focused on trying to understand the disease process and how can we treat the underlying problem. What I think we've started to see, and certainly this was a big topic at last year's ECTRIMS and this year's ECTRIMS again, is that there's been a bit of a realization of, while that stuff's important, we also need to be treating some of the symptoms and finding ways to treat some of the symptoms that are affecting the day-to-day life of people living with MS. So things like, other ways that we can directly influence or treat fatigue, pain being another one. So, I think that pain management is certainly an area. Those different areas are being looked into at the moment in terms of ways that could be beneficial to help people reduce their pain. We know that it's important because, decreased pain tends to lead to improved mobility, better tolerance for exercise, and we have a lot of evidence now suggesting that exercise can be really beneficial for people living with MS. Can also decrease depression, which is a big problem again in the MS community, and improve quality of life. So, certainly an area of interest. I don't know if that answers your question. It was something that I made a note of, and Debbie asked that question before, so hopefully that answers your question, Debbie. It is an area, and we can summarize some of those studies as well, if you're interested. And there was something on research and pain tonight on ABC where they could track it in MRIs. I didn't see it. I was preparing for this, but it's certainly interesting to have a look, and imaging. Imaging is certainly not one of my strongest areas in terms of understanding all of the different amazing things that they can do with MRIs, but there is a lot of interesting imaging research going on, and if they can track pain, obviously that may be something that's important for these sorts of studies. If they can find a way to actually effectively measure pain through something like that, it's a way of being able to tell whether these different techniques are beneficial. So, yeah, well, as I said, that's certainly one of the reasons why they're looking into pain management in MS, because we do know that if we can decrease the pain, it tends to lead to improvements in depression. And we know depression being a big issue. So, yeah, that's the pain story at the moment. So that's kind of my list of things done. So I'll if there's any last questions, feel free to drop them and we'll get to them quickly. But the last thing that I want to talk about is that we're getting obviously towards the end of 2019. And I may do another Facebook Live before the end of the year. But just to put a call out to people, if you're interested in having me do one of these for a group that you're involved in, whether that's in person, if it's somewhere in Australia, actually no, if it's in the world, who knows where I'll be at different times of the year. Anywhere in the world, if you're part of an MS group that meets up and would be interested in having me come and talk to the group and answer questions and do a presentation, or if you're part of a phone teleconference group, or anything like that, now is when all of my planning starts for 2020. So certainly, I love doing those sorts of events. I love being able to do these things and be able to have those sorts of conversation with you guys. So if you are interested, feel free to either comment now, drop us a message on MStranslate. You can email me, brett@mstranslate.com.au, or lowercase, because our planning is already starting for next year. So do let me know if you're interested. I know Kathy has let me know that she would be interested for one of her groups, but if you are a member of one of those groups, let me know. Fran, Pilates is starting to work for D, as was locomotive exercise therapy. With locomotive, I think it's retraining the brain to set signals to new channels to fire up the muscles involved in walking. Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff is really interesting because, I think there is part of, when we talk about that myelin repair stuff that we talked about before, there's a lot of comments that suggest that even if you do that, you're going to need to do some sort of training to be able to make those connections again. Pilates, we did a feature a while back with a member of our community who uses Pilates as his way of helping to manage his MS. We did a couple of videos with him that we published, and we can drop those in the comments below. But yeah, I think exercise and different forms of exercise could have lots of potential benefits for people living with MS, and we're seeing that now in lots of different studies. Thanks, Robin. Thank you for your participation. Hope you found it useful and beneficial. Have a great night. To everyone else, we are going to be finishing up. To Michael, if you're still here, Michael, we sort of talked a little bit before about the siponimod, fingolimod. Are they the same? Hopefully that video that we dropped has helped a little bit. As I think I sort of touched upon, they are similar-ish in terms of their modes of action. So they've got to do with these S1P molecules, S1P receptors. It's probably something that I would need to, if you're interested, probably do a bit of a short video on to explain it. It's just sort of talking about it may be a bit difficult to explain what all the different molecules are and how the treatments bind to them. But hopefully that video works a little bit. And yeah, in terms of, as a broad answer to your question, they do have very similar mechanisms of action, but they are slightly different. So with that being said, thank you everyone for your participation tonight. As always, the engagement for these events has been fantastic. In terms of all of the people watching, all the people asking questions, all the people sharing their personal experiences. It's hugely appreciated, as I've said a few times in the past few minutes. I really enjoyed these events. I wish I could do them more. I do always wish I had a few more hours in the day or an extra day in the week. It would help to be able to do them. But we, as you know, we are very committed to continuing to do these events. So, we will do another one, if not before the end of this year, certainly early in 2020. We'll be trying to get new and exciting guests so we get more exciting people to talk to than just me. But thank you again. I'm sure we will talk again before the end of 2020, before the end of 2019. Years flown by. And thank you again for your participation, and I hope to talk to you all again soon. Thanks, Fran. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Kylie. Have a great night, everyone. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.